And joining me now for more on the story is Marc Schulman, the author of Tel Aviv Diary and a columnist at Newsweek. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
Marc, what can we make of Trump saying he would treat Hamas differently than Netanyahu?
Well, he's clearly not Teddy Roosevelt, who said, speak softly and carry a big stick. He's the opposite. What would he do? That's a really big question. We learned, unfortunately, during this war that we were unable to release very many hostages using military power. So the question really comes down to what is it we can do? All we can do is hurt Hamas more. We could cut off food, but at this point, they have awful lot of food that they've brought in over the last 6 months, and certainly since the ceasefire. So we have a limited number of leverages what we could do. Going back to war is what at least part of this coalition supports, but the Israeli public, 80% of them want to end the war to get back all the hostages and only sometime later deal with Hamas. So it's very unclear what options Netanyahu has to go, what Trump would do. Trump doesn't have to worry, ultimately about the consequences in the same sort of way that Netanyahu does.
So how much pressure is the Trump administration actually putting in order to continue with the deal?
Unclear. It changes from day to day, and it changes whether you speak to Steve Witkoff or you speak to Trump. And Trump one day says, "I'll do anything that Netanyahu wants to do." It's his show. And then Steve Witkoff says, "I'm committed to getting back all the hostages that I can, and I'm committed to a second stage." Clearly, they were more committed to a second stage before Netanyahu went to Washington. Clearly, he managed to convince the administration, or at least President Trump, that maybe a second stage wasn't necessary. It's unclear. So it really varies from day to day, but we will not get back all the hostages without a second stage. The idea that we can extend this first stage here, maybe we can get 3 more hostages alive, but there are at least 25 of them still there and alive. And most Israelis are willing to pay the price for some future danger in order to get back these 25 people who've lived through hell for the last year and 5 months.
Right. And what if this deal falls? How do we expect the U.S. to respond to that?
Well, I suspect the U.S. will support Israel's actions. There won't be the sort of attempts to tell Israel you need to send more humanitarian aid. We might, not give you big bombs. The sort of nitpicking that the Biden White House did to Israel throughout the war won't happen with Trump. Now, the Biden White House will tell you that they were doing it out of love, and that they're worried about Israel's image in the world and everything else. And there's a little bit of truth to that as well. So I would suspect that if we're forced to go back to war, the Trump administration will support us fully. I don't think it'll make a big difference. That's the problem. The big problem that most of us have right now is we don't know what the magic wand that will work. What can we do this time so that we work, for 15 months, our soldiers fought bravely. Many of them gave their lives in Gaza. It didn't work in the end. I mean, we destroyed lots of people in the Hamas. We destroyed a lot of their infrastructure and everything else. But when it's all said and done, they're still in power. So what can we do differently this time? On top of which, the last thing, the earlier piece was on the Bibas family and on Israel beginning to heal. I'm not quite sure we're ready to heal, but that's the direction everyone would like to go in. Going back to war again and waking up in the morning and to what's called in Hebrew, utar leprisam. The army says we can now announce the fact that this and that soldier died yesterday in fighting in Gaza. That's not what this country needs right now. This country really does need to heal and really needs to come together and bring back all the rest of the hostages and dealing with Hamas later on.
Right. And meanwhile, many of the hostage families have been thanking President Trump. But isn't the framework for this deal from the Biden administration still? What do we make of that?
But look, absolutely, it was the Biden plan. It was the Biden-Bibi plan from last May. I can remember sitting in the studio discussing it the day it came out, being there one day and so things are all terrible, and overnight there was the plan, and the next day discussing it with someone else. Oh, maybe there's hope now. We can finally come to bring this to an end. But for whatever reason, Bibi didn't want to bring it to the end once Hamas accepted it, and so we kept on fighting and accomplished what we did manage to accomplish. Trump. What happened with Trump is he pressured Bibi, didn't pressure Hamas. The reason that we had a deal was that Bibi was forced to go ahead because Trump really pressured him. But look, everyone loves someone who talks, strongly. There's no question. Look, we all appreciate every Israeli I know. There's not one Israeli I know whether they really like Trump or don't like Trump, don't appreciate what he says, right? It sounds good. Even some of his crazy plans, and including his crazy AI imagination of what Gaza would look like. It may be completely ridiculous. It may never happen, but at least Israelis feel good about it. We have so little to feel good about. So we feel good about what Trump says. It makes us feel good. Can it be translated into policy? I don't know. The same man who thinks he won the election in 2014, that Ukraine started the war against Putin, and that the United States gave three times as much aid as Europe. These are all facts that he ignores. So how tied to reality is he when it comes to our things? We don't know. But he likes us. And we love people who like us. It's one of our weaknesses. Anyone who loves us, we love them back, which is, a human thing. But that's really the reality. Show us a little love, and I'll show you back. And that's what we're all about, really, as a country. And interestingly enough, despite our sophistication and everything else, all you need to win us over is show us some love.
Right. Marc, stay with us, and we'll come back to you in a moment, because speaking of this AI-generated music video Trump posted on his platform, Truth Social, of what is presumed to be his vision for the Gaza Strip Riviera. Take a look.
Donald's coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1.
So, as you can see on your screens, the clip depicts a modern coastal strip lined with promenades and high rises, as well as beautiful beaches. Some odd details also include, and yes, you saw that right, bearded belly dancers, as well as a golden statue of Trump himself with people dancing as dollar bills rain down, and with an Elon Musk lookalike appearing at various points throughout the video. Meanwhile, Trump himself is seen dancing with a scantily clad woman, and at the end, seen also suntanning with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. All of it a rather strange sight. And still with me is Marc Schulman. Marc, I just have to ask you, plain and simple, what on earth can we make of this video?
Well, it's a product of Grok, no doubt. That's the AI engine that Elon Musk has. That's why he's there so often. Look, it's fantasy. It's a crazy, insane fantasy. What's scary about this, in my mind, as someone who's actually involved in AI a fair amount, is that this is obviously AI and obviously absurd and everything else like that. But give us another year, 2 years, we'll have something very, very similar, except it'll really look real. And we won't know reality from the propaganda that's being shown and what's really real. And that's very scary. And of course, why he put it up there, I don't know. Look, it's humorous on a day where we've been so sad and such a difficult day here in Israel. This gave us a little bit of humor, to say the least. I don't think that was his goal. And I don't really know what he's going to be accomplishing in the Arab world by showing this. I mean, it's very problematic to certainly religious Muslims. This is a very, very problematic film. So who can make out what he was thinking, or who was working for him and put this up? We don't know. But he's keeping humoring us. He keeps it interesting. Let's put it that way.
Definitely, definitely strange timing to release such a clip. But more seriously, we do know Trump has some grand plans for Gaza. So what can we expect of that?
Very hard to say. Look, the biggest problem with Gaza has been the problem since the very beginning, that no one wanted the people of Gaza, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. No one wanted the Palestinian refugees. Look, in 1949, if the Palestinian refugees had been absorbed in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, in Gaza, in Egypt, then there wouldn't be a Palestinian refugee problem. There really wouldn't be a separate nation called Palestinians at all, because there just would have been Syrians and Lebanese. I mean, look, a Palestinian refugee who's still a refugee all these years later in Lebanon still can't be a doctor or a lawyer and all sorts of other things in Lebanon. So the bottom line is other places have to be willing to accept these refugees or these people. If this was 10 years ago, it might have been possible, but in the last 10 years, with what's happened with refugees around the world and the pushback against refugees, particularly from the Middle East, I see it very unlikely they're going to be people willing to take them. So that's why it doesn't seem all that likely. I mean, it's a, look, going back to the Israeli vision, I would be 1000% against forcing people out of whatever they consider their homes. It's a little bit problematic, but I would not be 1000% against if somehow they all decided to go somewhere. So that would be great on their free will, but they're just not likely to. In order for them to want to go somewhere, there has to be somewhere for them to go. And
Right.
look, Lapid had a plan yesterday. He presented it for Egypt to administer Gaza for 15 years in return for $150 billion. And the Egyptians turned it down. And it
Right.
seems like a pretty good deal to me. $150 billion to administer this place for 15 years? Why not?
Definitely a lot of options on the table here, and still none have been taken. So anyway, thank you for that insight. Marc Schulman, thank you for joining me.